What led you to conclude that Jackson, who often is called a populist, was actually and a frontiers person, was actually an elite Southern gentleman?
That's a great question. It's one that I've faced a lot over the years. For me, when I was learning about Jackson initially, I was reading all the histories that talked about him being a frontiersman, that talked about him being a populist. And I think that there certainly are elements of that in him throughout his life. But as I started to do research, what I realized was that Jackson really reflects more of what we consider the South, the American South, than he did the frontier region, or in fact with populism. So let me handle them a little bit differently. If you look at Jackson's background, he grows up in this Waxhaws region, moves to Charleston, South Carolina, moves up to Charlotte, North Carolina, eventually finds his way to Nashville in Middle Tennessee at the age of 21. And by the time he's made it to Nashville, he is someone who owns at least one enslaved person. He is someone who has engaged in at least one duel. He is someone who, when he enters Nashville society, seems to be accepted as a member of the elite. Many of the people who settled Nashville, at least the founders and the leaders of society there, came from Virginia, and they came from elite society in Virginia. And of course, Virginia reflected in many ways the ideals of Southern society at that time. So as I started to conceptualize this, it seemed to me that when Jackson arrives in Nashville, he doesn't arrive as sort of the cowboy striding onto the frontier. He doesn't arrive as someone who is still being formed and shaped by what he experienced. Of course, we all are as adults, but he is someone who at the age of 21 really has developed into his own individual person at that point. And the actions that he takes when he's in Nashville reflect his belief, and I think the people around him, their belief that he was an elite Southern gentleman. So he engages in buying and selling more enslaved people. He engages in buying and selling land. He engages in building plantations. These are all trademarks and hallmarks of someone who considers himself an elite Southern gentleman. So to me, when I see Jackson, I see someone who aspired to become and who became one of these Southern planters that we talk about so much in U.S. history. So that is the elite Southern planter part of his identity. The populist part, I think Jackson certainly to some extent embraces and reflects populism, but in many cases, he is using that for his own purposes. So as an elite Southern planter, as one of the wealthiest men in Tennessee, as one of the largest enslavers in Tennessee, he is someone who taps into the rhetoric of populism, but in many cases, he is doing so only to further his ambitions and the ambitions of the region in which he has settled in. So to me, when you look at Jackson, yes, I think there's some genuine authenticity when it comes to his belief in his own populism, but in many cases, it's just rhetoric that he uses to advance his political career.